Good evening, everyone, and welcome everyone to our third seminar, Human Rights at International Borders. And this is the third seminar of our series, New Frontiers of Human Rights. My name is Chiara Berneri, and I am a lecturer at the Open University in the UK. And I'm very grateful and honored to be moderating this event this evening. Before starting, I would like to thank the sponsors that have supported this project. In particular, I would like to thank the Center for Research in Politics and Human Rights at Sophia University Institute, the Institute on Religion, Law and Lawyers Work at Fordham University, and the Observatorio de Derechos Humanos at the University of Valladolid. A special thanks goes also to Professor Antonio Maria Baggio, Professor Adriana Cossetto, Professor Sergio Barbaro, Professor Andy Moraes, and Professor Maria Esther Salamanca Aguado for believing and encouraging this project from its very, very beginning. On this platform, we have already hosted 2 seminars. The first one back in October 2021. In that event, we looked at the origins of the human rights discourse, and we discovered how this discourse was born and how it changed over the years. In our second seminar in December, we explored and we looked at the new frontiers of human rights, particularly looking at the present and the future on the theme of transhumanism. If in the previous seminar we looked at frontiers somehow in a sort of metaphorical way, today we're gonna look and think about physical frontiers. Indeed, what we're gonna do today, we're gonna look at borders and human rights, particularly in Europe. Member states must take a stand against pushbacks at borders and clearly oppose attempts to legalize this illegal practice. This is what the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, Dunja Mijatovic, said in October 2021. Pushbacks, and we will hear more from our 2 speakers, are practices that consist in not permitting immigrants to enter state borders in order to claim for asylum. According to international law, these practices are not permitted. Yet, pushbacks do happen at various borders in Europe. These practices are, in fact, increasingly justified as a necessary way to deal with emergency situations. There have even been talks within the European Union about legalizing pushbacks if necessary to cope with mass influx migration. The images of migrants stuck at the eastern border of the European Union are circulating on the web. And equally, we also see pictures of migrants rerouted back at sea by some member states' boats in the southern part of Italy, often with the help and support of Frontex, the European Border and Coast Guard Agency. So what we see informs our perception of the situation at the borders. And in today's seminar, we will try to understand better what we see, and so understand better the situation, looking beyond the pictures, thanks to the help of our speakers. So let me briefly introduce the speakers tonight. So the first speaker is Professor Angeles Cano Linares. She's an associate professor of international public law and international relations at the Rey Juan Carlos University in Madrid, where she also holds the position of Deputy Vice Rector for International Relations and Director of the URJC University Center for Languages. Her main streams of research focus on the maintenance of international peace and security, international migration, the protection of human rights, international humanitarian law, and integration processes. She has taught and carried out research at different universities in Europe, South America, North America, and Africa. And she's the author of various monographs and publications on these themes. Miss Lina Gruduailite has been working as a practitioner. She's our second speaker. Has been working as a practitioner in the field of refugee integration and engagement since 2016. In January 2021, she helped to establish the new refugee-led organization, Refugee Council of Lithuania, and she currently coordinates its activities. She's also a PhD candidate at the Mykolas Romeris University. A research interest is narrative learning of practitioners working with refugees in NGOs. So speakers will speak roughly for 20 minutes, and at the end of both the talks, we will have time for questions. So if you want to ask questions, you can raise your hand and we will open the microphone for you, or you can put the questions in the chat box. Well, without further ado, then we give the floor to Professor Cano, who will talk about the practice of pushbacks at Europe's border. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Chiara. I was unmuting my microphone, sorry, and I think I have already uploaded my presentation, so you can see it. But first of all, I must say I am really pleased to participate in these cycles of seminars, New Frontiers on Human Rights. I strongly believe is a very important, is a very interesting and very accurate topic. So I must congratulate, as you have already done, those who have chosen it and have organized this cycle. I am very grateful to them to allow me to participate. And I must especially thank an excellent person, a magnificent professor, and my dearest friend, Professor Esther Salamanca. I am also very honored to share this seminar with Chiara Bernini and with Lina Gradulator. I am sure I'm going to learn a lot and I hope we will be able to create an interesting discussion. And once said that, I quickly go to my topic, the practice of pushbacks at European borders. And I have structured my contribution in 4 parts. I will do some previous considerations, and then I will present the main aspects of the international framework. I will summarize that talking about 2 conflicted principles in a way to understand what is happening, what happens with migrants, frontiers, borders, those migration, international flows. And then about the situation at European Union. And the basic question here is there coherence in its values? And I'm not going to answer that. I am just going to talk or refer some aspects, and I think everyone can take its own conclusion. And then I will talk about pushbacks. I will talk about legal or illegal practice. Chiara, you have said already illegal practice. I completely agree with you, but we have some decisions, or there are some practices that haven't been considered so illegal or a violation of the European Convention. So we must talk about it, and then some final considerations. So first of all, the title, Europe borders. Are we talking about Europe? Are we talking about European Union? So I would say we are talking about both, mainly about the European Union, but also about Europe, but also about the European, the Council of Europe and the Convention. Why? Because European Union has established in Article 6 of the Treaty of the European Union that the states shall accede. We haven't yet acceded, but the European Union will accede to the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Freedoms, and that the fundamental rights that's guaranteed by the Convention applies in European Union law. So it's completely related. I'm just one point. So the European Convention applies in European Union law, and also we have the Charter that, according to the Charter, is in accordance with the disposition of the Convention. So we are talking about mainly European Union borders, but it's completely linked to the Council of Europe and the Convention. And it's a problem of Eurocentrism, and I would say no. I mean, all of us are European citizens, and we are talking about European borders, yes, but I think there are two main reasons to talk about Europe. And one of those reasons are the values that European and Europe defend and has historically defend, and it's established in our constitution as on our founding treaties. It's evident that the Council of Europe, the main goal, the core of the Council is the protection of human rights, freedom, democracy, and related to the European Union. If we think about the Treaty of the European Union and we see what are the values of the European Union, it is clear established in Article 2 that the European Union shall or is based on some values that are those of respect of human right, of human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, and human rights, included those of persons belonging to other countries. So human rights is also the defense or the protection of human rights is one of the values of European Union. And it's one of the values that in its relation with the wide world, European Union must uphold and has to promote. And it's established in the goals, in the objectives established in Article, on the fifth part of Article 3 of the Treaty of the European Union. So human rights are completely related with Europe, and Europe has been historically the place, the land where human rights were defended. And maybe we could ask ourselves, is it still like this? And on the other hand, the other main reason is that, of course, European countries or European Union is the destination of many of those international mixed fluxes of migrants. So, I mean, there are plenty of migrants all over the world. Migration affects all the countries, but also affects European Union, and we are a destination. According to the last data published by European Eurostat, I will say there has been, in 2015, there was what was called a migrant crisis in European Union. And the main goal of European Union since then was to reduce the incoming or the people entering European Union. And there were a decrease during the pandemic time. And there are a lot of persons lawfully living or having residence in the European Union, foreigners having residence in the European Union. There are also a lot of asylum seekers and plenty of first application. And there are also numbers related to irregular border crossings. They decrease in the past years, and they are increasing. And those irregular border crossings can be done by boat or by land. So I am just have used those numbers just to have a very quick picture of the different kinds of persons that may find themselves at the borders of the European Union. And in 2000, last year, the data are not complete yet, but there was more than 1,050 illegal border crossings, and it was an increase in relation with 2020. So I've talked about illegal border crossings, and the terms used by European Union Eurostat. I've talked about asylum application. I have talked about legal residents inside the European Union. All of them have crossed the external borders of the European Union. But the most important data are those referred to asylum applicants, because we will see those are the ones that have the right to really enter the European Union. And there was this increase in 2015, and then the decrease, and now it's again increasing. So that was to have a very quick overview as previous consideration. Regarding the international framework, I've told you, I think there are two conflicted principles that explain why this question, this issue is, or this topic is so controversial. And I think it's so controversial because there is we have two structural principles of international law, two main principles that cannot be fully applied without creating some controversy or some conflict. So that's what I think there's a kind of widespread between sovereignty and human rights. Why? Sovereignty, because it's the main characteristic, the main trait of states. States are sovereign, so they can decide what they do. Of course, the sovereignty has some limits, but because all the states are equally sovereign, so there must be some limits. But the fact is, reality is that the states have or exercise their territorial jurisdiction on their territory. In some cases also they exercise their power through extraterritorial jurisdiction, in some cases based on lawful practices, some cases not so lawful or illegal practices, but mainly states have or exercise the power and control the territory. And it's a competence of the state to control the access to the territory. They are responsible for what happens in their land, in their territory, so they are responsible to decide who may enter the territory, who may stay in the territory, or who must leave the territory, and is a sovereign competence. And states are clearly defending this competence that comes from the sovereignty. On the other hand, we have international law of human rights, international protection of human rights. We have people, human beings, and in this case, we have some rights, human rights, and of course, the main one, or the most important in this case, the free movement of persons. It's recognized in Article 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it clearly states that we can freely, or everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. And everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and return to his country. So at first we could say, yes, we can freely move. But Article 13 of the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights specifies, and now we are talking about duties, about obligations of the state, establish that everyone lawfully within the territory of a state will have the freedom of movement. So only those who have lawfully crossed the borders, the external borders. And the next article of the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, talks an alien lawfully in the territory of the state may be expelled under some conditions. I mean, only as a consequence of a decision adopted according to law. So the International Convention clearly specifies that the states are the one who can authorize the entering a state. We have the freedom and the right to leave our countries. We have the freedom to return to our countries. I'm talking about legal instruments, international legal instruments, but we haven't the right to enter the territory of another state if the state doesn't allow us to do so. This is true, except for a group of persons, a group of vulnerable persons, and this group are the refugees. And it has to do with another right recognized at the Universal Declaration as the right to asylum, that establishes that everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy asylum if they are suffering persecution. And those people, those group of people suffering persecution in some conditions are protected by our convention, is the 1951 Refugee Convention of the Status of Refugees. And the persons that are accepted as a refugee, that fulfills the requirements established in the convention to be a refugee according to the convention, must be granted international protection. So that's why I say the only that can lawfully enter into a state are the ones who are refugees. The problem is that according to the convention, the state is the one that's going to establish is a person, is a refugee, and those people cannot be expelled. Thank you very much. If they are going to a country that they may suffer torture or having their life in peril. At the European Union, at the European level, we have the Protocol 4 to the European Convention. At the European Union level, the European Charter, almost all of them in the same sense, and prohibiting the collective expulsion of aliens. And also in the European Union, we have this area of freedom, security, and justice, and those external common borders protected, as Chiara has said, by Frontex, and we have a kind of common asylum system. And then we have migrants, irregular migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees who are the ones who have received international protection. We have those practices, and Chiara has perfectly explained that we may have maritime borders. So what happens if those operations, those ships are controlling sea borders or search and rescue zones, and they are not allowing living, for example, Libyan rescue zone, so they are forced to go back to the Libyan territory. And that's a kind of pushback, a maritime pushback. And then we have the territorial one, and in this case we have fences. Those are the Spanish Melilla fences, and maybe one of those people here in this photo are ND or NT. There are two sub-Saharan people that presented a case under the European Court of Human Rights. And in the first decision in 2017, the chamber decided that the Spanish pushbacks were unlawful, but in the review, the Grand Charter passed a judgment and decided that there was not a violation of the European Convention of Human Rights. So I don't know this contract with you may think who is winning it. The first time it was the protection of migrants, even if it wasn't strictly territorial competence. And in the second one, it's clearly the control of international borders and the access to the territory of the state. I will only say to finish that European Union, the Commission in September 2020 has proposed a new pact on migration and asylum, trying to provide a comprehensive approach of it with many proposals. And some of those proposals go in the path of establishing more controls at the borders before entering the territory of the Union. So we may have more problems, and I'm not going to go further on this. Maybe then after the question, I will only have some last reflections. These are Western, I have already said, in this moment seems to go in favor of the sovereign powers of the state. I am also very worried that because human beings are used as a means of pressure, and I think it's like a parallelism in armed conflict. There has been an evolution, and civilians have. They are not anymore protected as they should be under humanitarian international law, and they have become weapons, means, targets of armed conflicts. So in non-armed conflicts, in those international tension, crises, controversies, I think human beings are also used as tools, as means to exercise pressure. And yes, we have those terrible practices of pushback, but we also have, and maybe Lina will talk about it, those that I have called also illegitimate and practices of push in. So the final or the common situation is that human beings are used and not protected as they should be. And I think one of for migrants and for this protection of migrants at the borders, I think we must defend the principle of non-refoulement as a general customary law rule, even maybe as a Sophia rule. And just I knew from this morning, I read that an Iranian woman has presented a case at the Human Rights Committee claiming a crime of torture, abuse, and against Greece because of several pushbacks. So it's a practice that is going on, and I think we must fight against it. So thank you very much, and I think I finished more or less on time.
That's perfect, and thank you so much. It was very, very interesting and insightful, and it's great to have had this legislative background, because now, yeah, I think we have more of an idea where we're coming from the law point of view, and then later we can discuss a little bit longer. But thank you.
I'm not sharing anymore, or I'm still sharing?
You're not sharing.
Okay.
I don't think. No? Yeah.
No.
Let me check. No, you're not. Perfect. Okay, so now we give the floor to Miss Lina Grudulaite, who will tell us more about the Eastern border route and the experiences from Lithuania. Thank you so much.
Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
So for these who might, first of all, I'm very happy to be here and to present. And actually, I see a lot of links with presentation of Angela's Kana, because I would like to illustrate by some examples, and also by some examples from the legislation of Lithuania, how these principles came into practice in my country. So here's just a map of Lithuania, just so maybe somebody don't know where it is. And you see it's very close to the border of Belarus. So how people actually arrive to Lithuania, there are like various different routes. So some you can see in this map. The most common from Baghdad, Iraq, and the biggest numbers of people arrived to Minsk by this way, but actually there are like various different directions. And why this route, why this route became so accessible and important because of visas, and how easy it became to get a visa to arrive to Belarus. So why the topic is important? Because I argue that in Lithuania, Poland, Latvia, we disregard our obligations for international rules, and a lot of people are put in risks for that reason, and some of them like lose their lives in the forest of Belarus, and that is against the Geneva Convention, and various international organizations, they are criticizing the practices of our countries currently. And there is need of bigger transparency about these issues. So as I mentioned, like it became like very easy to get visas. So I just illustrated, because media also, they were doing some research how people arrive. Like, so it's like a typical case study, which was presented like by people from Iraq, how they come like to Belarus, because frequently they are deceived that it will be legal because they are coming with tourism visa, and that some car will come to pick them up, like all travel will be organized. And so at least initially, of course, after like information was traveling, people were realizing about challenges, but a lot of people also were deceived, thinking that the route will be quite easy, and they would be able to reach other European Union countries. And yes, and actually it was quite organized, a network of smuggling. So even like taxis, often people were bringing like next to the border, to the forest, and then leaving them like to cross. But a lot of people crossing from Belarus, they ended up like in detention centers initially. So so the numbers increased like immediately after sanctions were announced on Belarus, and also Lukashenko was criticizing, our government was criticizing Lukashenko quite loudly. And also in Lithuania, we hosted opposition of Belarus. So it was like very direct threat that from Lukashenko that you'll see that migrants will come to your country. And actually it became true very quickly after that announcement. So we saw initially the change already in spring of 2021, but the numbers started to grow very quickly in summer months, especially June, July. So just in July, there were almost 3,000 people detained in Lithuania. And so it was a big difference because even though this route through Belarus was not new, and we had like irregular migrants crossing before, but the numbers, they were small. So there was no international attention, and also in Lithuania, there were like no significant changes in legislation because in asylum system because of that. But because numbers increased so much, our asylum system could not cope anymore. Like new facilities had to be created, new camps. And in short time, there were like 33 new accommodation centers opened. Like some of them, they were like camps with tents, like with very bad conditions, in some abandoned buildings and old schools with maybe broken windows and so on. So currently it's quite reorganized. Like, so we have like less sites, and they have like better physical conditions, but still, like, it's detention, and it reminds in many ways like imprisonment of asylum seekers. And also politicians like faced a lot of resistance of locals when these sites were created. And within Lithuania, the narratives started to shift very significantly. So asylum seekers started to be named as illegal migrants in media, in all public talks, and they started to be portrayed as threat to national security. And it was justified that we need to protect our borders, to defend against the influx. So what happened? What followed? So in Lithuania, immediately in July, like new resolution was made, and this migration flow was named as hybrid aggression from Belarus, and irregular migrants, they were named even like as guns of hybrid guns. And there followed amendments in our legislation. So in local legislation, mass detention became legal, including small kids, families. And so these people in Lithuania still, they cannot leave really facilities. They are guarded by guards, by dogs, and sometimes cannot even go outside. In August 10th, the legislation was amended again. So you could apply for asylum only in embassies in Belarus or at border crossing points. But practically it was and it is very, very complicated, because also from Belarus side, guards, they are not allowing for people to enter these posts. And also in order to enter, you need to have like documents and so on. So I don't know exactly the number, how many applications are now, but a few weeks ago, it was, I think, only 11 applications made, like, so it's like very small number, knowing how many people are trying to cross the border. So it's, yeah, hardly possible to apply for asylum in this way. Also the borders, they were protected a lot initially, like from media, NGOs, so on. So it was like no-go zone. So it was difficult to find out like what is happening there. Like, so people knew very little like about numbers, situations, and so on. In our media, usually announce only numbers, like today there were like 40 pushbacks or something like, but you don't know exactly situations of people, vulnerability, and so on. Like, so it's quite kept from society. So media made statement that they would like to access these areas, and now actually they can go closer and to do like some presentations of what is happening, but still there are like some limitations applied for that. Humanitarian packages were introduced as well by government in October, when it became public that there are people like in the forest, in vulnerable situations. Also the climate started to change in autumn a lot, and people really who are stuck at the borders, they're facing risks for their life and health, like daily. So, like, to get an idea what kind of nationalities of people were detained, like this data from the detention, so you could see that it's great diversity, even though majority was from Iraq, because you could get visa in easiest way like that, but people were coming from over 24 different countries, and so it's like really big diversity of asylum seekers. And in some countries, the situations are really complicated, and it's really justified to apply for asylum. So what was the role of civil society? Like in Lithuania, maybe we did not have like so big experience of collaborating, but the crisis really united a lot existing NGOs working in the field. Like, so 9 NGOs joined together, and they had like weekly meetings addressing like situation, how they could contribute, and also for fundraising campaigns. So they raised money to address some basic needs at camps. And in Lithuania, the main coordinator like of humanitarian help became Red Cross, but also joined by other big organizations like Caritas, Malta Order, and others. Like these are the main organizations currently operating at detention camps. Just recently, also Red Cross published monitoring report about situations of asylum seekers. And in that report, they state that most complaints were during July, September about conditions, but there are still a lot of like needs at the camps which are not addressed, related like to medical needs, psychological needs, lawyers, and so on. There are like mobile teams of various specialists who are traveling in different camps and visiting and gathering the needs of people, including teams of medics and lawyers, but the numbers of these specialists, they are not enough for the demand which is existing. There are just a few lawyers in this field, and almost all people want to appeal their decisions, like, and not to be detained. So the demand is really bigger than opportunities to meet it currently. And for the issue, like the peak of attention was actually during situation in Poland. Like, so usually people from abroad know better about Polish situation than Lithuanian one. And maybe they don't know that actually everything started from Lithuania and followed later, like the flows to Poland. So so many people saw like about 5,000 immigrants gathered at Polish border. Now situation a bit changed, like there are like no so big groups at Lithuanian, Latvian or Polish groups, but there are more small groups which are dispersed at the borders, and they're still trying to cross and enter on daily basis. And also the route of migrants, it's constantly like changing, it's dynamic. So firstly, it was more Lithuania, then was more Poland. Now it's more Latvia, actually. So the numbers are changing, how people and directions, how people try to cross. So in August, in our legislation, you could see local Lithuanian, it was legalized pushbacks. And Poland followed our example very quickly. At end of August, they also introduced legislation legalizing pushbacks. And also it was used like emergency orders in both countries, which justified like strict control of borders and restriction for journalists, NGOs to access or offer help. So in Lithuania, it was removed just recently on 15th of January. So it's kind of opportunity maybe to have a little bit more transparency, because now it's a bit easier to reach border, and NGOs or journalists can enter closer. But still, there is a limit, like, so it's from 1 kilometer to 50 meters where you cannot reach. And what is the main difference between Poland and Lithuania? I would say maybe Frontex participation in Lithuania, because we invited and allowed Frontex to stay, so maybe it offers a little bit more transparency. And yeah, hard to tell, but at least Frontex reported about some serious incidents with suspicion of violation of fundamental rights and yeah, pushbacks in Lithuania. So it is obvious that new migration governance is happening, and concertina via is being built in Lithuania and Poland, and there is lack of established procedure of establishing vulnerability of people at the borders. Like so usually we know just numbers, but and sometimes state accepts like very small numbers to Lithuania, but there is no clear criteria why these people are accepted to the country. Either it's families with kids could be criteria or not, so it's not existing still like in Lithuania. There are like some volunteers groups who are, and these people are a bit like partisans, like working in the forest and trying to help crossing people, like offering humanitarian help, like maybe food, sleeping bags, but they are being sometimes criminalized or limited in their activities. But these volunteers, at least in Lithuania, like they learned to submit interim measures, like to European Court of Human Rights. And recently, they, well, I don't know, you could say won or not, but it was like approved these cases, and the state was not allowed to push back to Belarus, like some people. So it was like temporary decision, so it's not clear what will happen now. Like maybe they will be pushed back again, but it was a certain success, and state followed what was told by European Court of Human Rights. So we had like very recent developments again in legislation in end of December. So initially in our legislation was 6 months basis like of detention. Now it can be prolonged 6 months more if there is risk for people to flee. And often it can be considered that there is a risk because a lot of people want to go somewhere further. So most of people might be detained like up to 1 year, and in some exceptional cases even up to 18 months if it's considered abuse of asylum system or risk to the country. The court order, it can be even up to 18 months of detention. Also now introduce some restrictions who can provide humanitarian help. So now only with NGOs with state agreements can provide humanitarian help. So it also limits because state might not want to do agreements with these NGOs which are criticizing their work. Like so. And in our organization, we often hear the stories and contacted we are contacted by asylum seekers who complain that they are pressurized to return home and sign voluntary return papers. So it's not becoming voluntary anymore, but there are like certain measures used of threats. So they would sign these papers and would return back to their countries, or they would meet like some delegations. So recently it was delegation from Congo coming, so people were kind of forced to meet them. Now also came a report about one detention center of Kibarte. So it was compared like to prison conditions and also like equal like to torture sometimes. Like so the conditions are very unequal in the centers, and some are really better, but in Kibarte and these practices are criticized by international organizations. So, and conditions at camps, like they are challenging, people facing a lot of psychological problems because of lack of information to them. Also, they don't know how long they will be detained and what will happen to them. Like, so there are a lot of challenges like to meet needs of people. Also, school children, they cannot go to schools and have education only at camps. And yeah, there are a lot of legal questions as well, because currently people can appeal. Like before, it was also even quite limited because you could appeal only to migration, which was giving decisions. So now you can appeal to the court, but the time of appeal is very short, like 7 days. And there is lack of lawyers to help, like so often people fail to appeal on time. But these people who manage to get like private lawyers who are really expensive now, but from their experience, if they take the cases to court, most of the time they win and people are released from the centers. So yes, and now asylum recognition rate is really low. As you see, only 101 was granted asylum and the rest were rejected. And this is a picture from one detention center. So yeah, and I am representing Refugee Council of Lithuania. Like, so we are trying to inform about situation. In our organization, we have actually members who are refugees themselves. So for them, it's easier to build contact with asylum seekers. They build easier contact, and they share their stories, and we try to share that with the public as well. As I mentioned as well, Sienas Group, it's an initiative of volunteers who are helping at the borders currently and providing humanitarian help. Here I also included one success story of Somali girls, because it was incident when actually they were pushed back to Belarus, like they were just teenage girls, but luckily through the help of this group and contacts and foreign volunteers, these girls now they were legally invited to go to Luxembourg and to apply for asylum there. Like, so it was a success story of this group. See, and I don't know what is the time now. Cannot see because it's like
I cannot see it either, but
the last slide I have, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think yeah, go, and then we open for the discussion. Yeah, that's fine.
Because it's a bit long. I just have one post of Siena's group, which is very recent, which illustrates of situation, maybe like, so I won't read all, but like some extracts from there, like, We made our way through the deep snow and the car suddenly got stuck. We decided to take on the last kilometers on foot to reach the migrant location. On arrival, we find 4 disorientated men from Pakistan. All that this group had were 2 sleeping bags they used to sit on the cold snow-covered ground in -7 Celsius. They had no shelter whatsoever. One was shivering from cold. Another man had wounds and swelling on his face. He was beaten by Belarusian border guards trying to force the group towards the border. So the volunteers, we gave them hot tea and warm soup. The first warm food they got to eat in 14 days. They begged to be brought somewhere warm. They were scared of another night in the forest and would rather go to prison. We were brought to the border control station where warnings were issued for us for entering the restricted border zone. Some of us were interrogated and intimidated by criminal police through implications of human trafficking under the cover of humanitarian aid. After 6 hours at the station, we were not taken back to our cars 10 kilometers away. Everyone arrived tired at the base after this 15-hour mission. The migrant group was supposedly taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, we lost contact with them the next day, and the border service guard refused to share any information on their location and condition. But fortunately, thanks to brave and hardworking activists, we learned that they have been pushed back to Belarus, but are in safe place now. So it was just one case to illustrate the daily situation of migrants in Lithuania borders. So thank you for attention.
Lina, thank you so much. I don't know, let me see, I can, yeah, there we go. Thank you so much for your presentation, and it was really moving also to hear the concrete experiences that these people have to face, and also the work that the NGOs do to try to help. Well, now let me just open the chat, because I don't know if there are questions already. I can't see any question yet, but I might just take the opportunity in my role of moderator to start with the questions, and in the meantime, if people want to raise points, etc., you can raise the hand or put it in the chat box.
Chiara, just a moment, I want to...
Yes. Oh, yeah. You want to ask a question, Sergio?
No, I want to thank...
go.
Yeah, from Sophia, because I don't have the opportunity before, because I connected late for another appointment. And I want to thank the lecturers for the participation from Sophia and from Director Antonio Baggio, which is the director of the center and with the Department of Political Science. And also, I want to say something I think can help the discussion. And what I'm noticing studying this subject from my point of view, I'm a comparative lawyer, and I teach comparative law in Sophia Institute, is that there is something really disturbing in every legislation at this point in migration law. This phenomenon is the criminalization of the position of the irregular migrants. It's something we see in Italy, and at this point. In Italy, we have this criminalization of the position of the migrants, the irregular migrants, with the introduction of a new kind of sanctions for the migrants, for the regular migrants. And it's something we see in the American legislation as well. And we saw in the American legislation, and something we can see in the French legislation, So, and also I noticed that there's something that see also in this other legislation, Tuania, Bilaria, and the other legislation all over Europe. So I think there is a space here to say something. In Italy, there are different professors who are saying that something has to change. And from this point of view, to change this view of the irregular migrants as criminals, which is really diffuse, already diffuse. And also, we can, I think, as professor of law, as on NGOs and so on, we have to do more about this. And so, I don't know if you agree, but something really disturbing. And they really, there is this situation in different countries. Also Italy, in which the number of refugees it's huge, but to push the refugees back, we are using the criminal law, not the civil law, not the administrative law, but the criminal law. So something I want to add to the discussion. Also, in the United States, they speak about blending crime and migration. They speak about crime migration. The new phenomenon is crime migration, the criminalization of the law of migrants. So just this. And also to thank for the very interesting participation of Professor Cano and Miss Gudelight.
Thank you very much, Sergio, because I think this is a very important point as well, like this idea of as you say, criminalization of migration. And I mean, seeking asylum is not, at least now, a crime, right? But yet there are legislations that somehow push it a bit that way. But there's one thing now, thinking about both the presentations, but first in particular in relation what Professor Cano said about this idea of state sovereignty, because it's true. I mean, we live in states. States have sovereignty on their territory, and they can decide who can enter, who cannot enter, and how to guard their borders, with the exception of asylum seekers, right? So now, how do we deal with that? In the sense that I think we have these people that have rights, and that they try to enter to seek a better life. Often some people maybe don't have backgrounds to seek for asylum, but many do, and so they could be granted asylum. On the other hand, maybe we also have states that claim that they have sovereignty, and sometimes also, which is true, but sometimes maybe also legitimately, because they say, okay, we can't accommodate everyone, or at least we can't do it by ourselves. So there isn't an easy solution here. So I was wondering, Professor Cano, and anyone who would like to intervene in any case, whether you think there could be a good legislative compromise to take into account the needs and the rights of these people, and also some of the some legitimate concerns of some member states. That I wonder if that's if there's a way we could think about, because it's an open question and there's no easy answer. But I
Do
don't
you
know.
want me, Chiara? Do you want me to
Yeah,
answer?
if you
Or
if you would like.
Shall we wait for Esther that has all her hand? No, no, me. Okay, okay. I would like to say, I mean, it's very. I have said it first of all. It's a very controversial topic, and it's very complex. And if I started talking about those two principles, it's because it's what I understand are the basis of the current controversy. I mean, both of them are essential for international relations, and it's a way of trying to make them live together, and it's not very easy, has never been. It's the same confrontation as the classical one in law. We talk about freedom and security. More security, less freedom, more freedom, less security. It's the same. But you have asked a very concrete question. I think, I mean, we may agree it's correct or not, but current international law doesn't give human beings the right to enter another country if the country doesn't allow them. That's a fact. But it doesn't mean they aren't human beings anymore. So international protection of human rights is always due. I mean, this protection always might be there, even if you don't enter the territory. So the basic of the protection is there. So you cannot torture. I mean, that's the problem. And that's why this new practice of those kind of spaces that aren't exactly jurisdiction of the states, because the states are aware that they have to fulfill their obligations towards human rights of everyone. So they say, no, they are not under my jurisdiction, so it's not my problem. And that's one of the aspects of those pushbacks. So I think, I mean, we must, the respect of human rights is the only answer I have today. And no, and a second answer, making those kind of seminars, making everyone aware of what we have. And that's very, I think it's the most important thing, because it's very easy to say, let's defend free movement of people. But if you say so, you must ask yourself if you are going to agree to share your welfare with others. Because if we are going to open our frontier or borders, we must share what we have, and we are the richest one. So I think young generations need to think and about that and find a solution. And of course, finally, the problem is the inequality. I mean, we have there are so many differences that this inequality is the cause of those movements. I'd like to say another thing. There is then a trend, yes, it's true, to criminalize, but fortunately, to criminalize migration, but at least since 2000, since the adoption of the Palermo Protocols, irregular migrants are not criminals. So there are some state practice trying to criminalize, but they cannot be officially criminalized. So that's very, very important. I think we are making very slow steps, but at least we have done some steps. And now most of the countries, or a lot of countries, are parties of the Palermo Protocols against smuggling and trafficking. And so crossing irregularly a border is not a crime. So that's why they are not in detention in jails. They are in centers, specific centers. It's the same. I mean, it's how hypocrisy. That's what I was asking myself, if there was a real coherence with the values we defend. Because yes, we fulfill the obligations of international law. Yes, we respect human rights. Yes, we don't criminalize migrants. No, we don't. No, we don't put them in jail. No, they're in detention centers. So we are not coherent. I mean, there is a hypocrisy, I think, of most of us. And there is, I think there's also another practice, a very perverse one, is the criminalization of humanitarian assistance. And that's also a very, unfortunately, a very common practice. And I remember the first captains of boat at the rescues and people at the Mediterranean Sea, when Lampedusa, Italy tried to apply the directive of helping. So that was amazing. And they had the duty to rescue people. So that's why now that we are surveilling the borders at the external border of the rescue search and rescue zones. so not to be under the jurisdiction of the states. So it's always this battle, trying to fulfill international obligation, but without assuming too many compromises. And it's this terrible, difficult balance between those two principles that I will summarize. I mean, I'm plenty of things, but I think it's a graphic image: sovereignty versus human rights, and that's what is fighting. This is how I like to explain it. I don't know if I have answered.
No, absolutely. And thank you so much. Esther, I can see you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Chiara, and all the participants in the webinar. I'm very happy with this third seminar because we have started a long time ago, and finally we have these three seminars. Yes, well, I just wanted to say two things. One is what we face, that it's more than 84 million people who leaves the home and are moving around the world. So it's difficult to think how are we going to deal with this million of people if we think only from a very narrow perspective, for example, from the perspective of state or region. So this global compact that we agreed in some years ago, it's, I think, at least a way of face this phenomenon because it's increasing. So the reality is the people is moving around the world. And it's true, we have borders and we have the right of states to protect borders and to define the migration policies. But the only solution I see is solidarity. I mean, we have to reduce the pressure of states who support more migration, more asylum seekers. And I mean, in the European Union, we have some mechanisms of solidarity, which is binding for member states. And a global context is more difficult, but I think is the way. The only way to face this phenomenon is to share the responsibility among all countries. And obviously, which countries who has more resources have more responsibility, because in fact, the reality is that the poor countries have more pressure than the rich countries. But I mean, this is one topic. And also, I wanted to come back to the just one idea of the European Court of Human Rights in the case of Spain that Angeles said, because it is very interesting how the chamber introduced a new approach. Because in the case of Spain, what the court said is that there was no breach of the protocol if the deportees have caused the collective expulsion by their own culpable conduct, because they didn't go through the regular border procedures. So if they didn't go to the checkpoint in Morocco, they cannot then enter illegally. So there is no responsibility for Spain to push back, because this situation was created by the action of the migrants, because they didn't went to the checkpoint. But in practice, they cannot go to the checkpoint because the Morocco situation don't allow them. But the court say it's not our problem, because we are not, the convention does not apply in Morocco. So it's an approach very difficult to solve, because in theory, the pushback is possible if the migrants didn't go to the legal way of entering. But in practice, the sub-Saharan people cannot go to the checkpoint, cannot apply legally. So this is a new approach, very, very dangerous, because it's not have empathy with people who is moving in Africa. So this is just to say that.
I completely agree. And it's not only our case. I think Lina has said the same. from the Belarus authority doesn't allow people to arrive to the checkpoint, so there is no way to enter legally, to seek legally for asylum, and they can be pushed back. So it's this hypocrisy.
Yes, I think we know. For that, I wanted to say two things. These two things. One is solidarity is the way to share responsibilities, and the other way to deal with illegal migration is to allow legal migration. So how can we do to allow people who really have to leave their homes to move legally and to avoid trafficking of people and to avoid the death of people, etc. So I think we have to work from that to promote legal entry and to promote more open policy, migration policies. And also the second part is the security inside the state. This is the second part, to how to allocate these people, how to prevent extremism, how to prevent other things. No, but this is very, very complex, but I think we have to face that because people are moving and it's going to move in the future. Climate change, poverty, etc.
I completely agree, but I am not very optimistic because of the new pact on migration and asylum of the European Union, because the legal ways to enter the European Union is only for the qualified workers, and that's the only change. And the solidarity, yes, perfect mechanism, or you accept them or you pay for pushing them back to return them. So it's not the kind of solidarity I think you were thinking of, Esther. So it's I'm not very optimistic, but we must keep on denouncing and thinking and promoting those discussions because that's a big issue. And is, as you have said, is a universal question, and it's not our generation, next generation, they are going to face it. And if we have a globalized world for goods and services and capital, we can avoid people moving from a place to another. And if there is so many inequality, and that's very, very important.
Thank you so much. And one thing I would like to add on this, and then I have a couple of questions for you, Lina, because I was very fascinated by hearing the stories from Lithuania. But on this point on solutions, at the moment, I am working on private sponsorships of refugees. And it's a very interesting topic because in the European Union, there isn't a legislation on private sponsorship of refugees, and it's up to the individual state. Another characteristic, so what are they? They're basically, you have a private sponsor, if the state allows it, that can bring in a family or a certain number of refugees, but, and this is a but, that are normally in the UN camps. So not people that come to the borders of Europe. So these people that can be relocated by private refugees, if the state allows it, are also people that are in refugee camps, which is already, I think, a very important step forward. But my idea, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm not certainly don't have the solution, but I was thinking, but why couldn't we open private sponsorships also to people outside the UN camps, perhaps at the border? Because if there's a private sponsor that is willing to, for a certain time, pay, take care of a family, for instance, okay, it's a drop in the ocean. But if that could be made possible, I think it could be maybe an initial answer. So private sponsorship of refugees not just for people entitled to resettlement, but perhaps also people that are in need and are at the European borders already. I don't know. It's a discussion that will need a seminar in itself, but yeah, I just wanted to put it out there. Yeah, sorry, I'm conscious also about the time because it's nearly 7:30 Italian time, and for you, Lina, 8:30. So you maybe are hungry as well. But I was wondering, so you were talking about these stories about these people coming, and it looks like at the very beginning, people were kind of deceived, sorry, by the Belarus sort of easy visa policy. Has that changed in the sense, are now people that embark this route aware of what they could face at the border of Europe, or do you think that they don't know? Because it's interesting to see that if they know and they still want to try, I think it means that probably they come from even worse situations and they're trying to find a better life. I don't know.
I think now, like, they are following also all networks, internet, and so on, or hearing stories from people. So more or less, they know situation at the borders, but I think some people are still quite desperate, like to go to EU, and they don't want to return to their own countries. And also another issue is conditions of them, like in Belarus, so who got stuck, who flew there, and their visas may be expired, and they did not agree to return voluntary, or there are not, because the flights were only to certain countries like Iraq and so on to return, and for some countries they might not be able so easily to return. So the prices of rent are very, very expensive, like in Belarus, because a lot of locals, they also started to use that situation, knowing that there are a lot of people like trying to find accommodation. So it's very hard to find like a cheap place where to live there, like, and also, for example, when they are trying to go to borders and or taking a taxi or something. So we're hearing stories of kidnapping people and then asking them to pay big amounts of money to be freed. So there is a lot of like deception, and sometimes also difficulties to transfer money, like to Belarus from other countries and so on. Like, so a lot of people are running out of money as well. So they might end up like living somewhere in the streets or in some shelters there. Like, so also that situation pushes them like to move, like if you do not have like the roof over your head, like so then they might also risk either to live in the forest and so on. But from the stories of volunteers, also some people were really unprepared for winter conditions, like so just going to forest like with sneakers and so on, like so the not winter jackets and so on, like so.
Sergio, I can see your hand.
Yeah, I have a question for Ms. Fredolide. We in Italy, we listen about these green lanterns. These people in Belarus or in Poland, they offer assistance to migrants. Can you say something about this? Because something really interesting, but just few papers, few media spoke about it. So I'm very interested in, want to know better about this phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. About these people helping for migrants.
Yeah, green. In Italy, they call it the titles of the papers. The titles of the paper, they call it green lanterns. they put this green lantern in the forest, and this is a sign of the possibility of assistance.
I know they use that in Poland as well. Like in Lithuania, we don't have like that green light system where locals could host, but now these volunteers, they are building also a lot of networks with communities, trying to see like other people who might help. Like it started from very small initiative, just from few people, but now it really, the network in Lithuania started to grow. People started to join, also like some professionals like social workers, also Medics Without Borders are helping sometimes in the missions. As you might have heard maybe from Poland, like, they went away because they were not able like to access and provide medical help, like, but in Lithuania, like these volunteers were able like to reach people, but they were also like receiving fines. So these people, they know that they face dangers as well, like because by politicians, they are usually not.
Sorry, Lina. So they were receiving fines from the state, from Lithuania. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Simply for going. Would they, to do that? So the forest would be on the Belarus side, right? So
no, in Lithuania, because we have like,
okay, yeah,
emergency orders. So it meant
okay.
like there was like 10-kilometer zone where you had to have permission, and 5 kilometers which you cannot like enter. So they went further than this zone.
Okay.
To assist people, and then patrols saw them and they received fines, but including Medics Without Borders, they also received fines for offering medical help for a person who could not walk and was experiencing hibernation, like so.
Oh, wow. And sorry, I'm just gonna ask a final thing, but in your slides, you were talking about also the situation of children that in the, well, I suppose, I mean, I saw pictures and probably was on the Polish border, but I saw that there are families with children also in the forest. So that must be something, I mean, for a family, so painful. And are these children somehow looked after, or they managed to receive some help, at least in terms of food and being covered, or?
So this offering like very minimal like humanitarian help, like so now maybe packages, they became like a little bit better, they are giving like, but initially it was like some like cold food, like soup they're giving, but you don't have hot water where you boil it, like, so it was not like very practical help. And that group I was mentioning, they were assisting to one family with like several small children which were ill, and because of that situation, they thought that they won't be pushed back to Belarus. So that's why they informed the guards about the family and so on. But unfortunately, they were just kept like just for one night, checked by medical staff, and next day pushed to Belarus. So that did not help. So since then, that group of volunteers, they're a bit more reluctant to call guards when they see the group. So like in last cases, what they were doing, like then they see vulnerable group, they were applying to human rights court with interim measures and waiting to their answer. And when they get answer, then they were informing authorities that there is a group and we have interim measures that not to push them back because they are vulnerable.
Thank you, Lina. Thank you very much. So I think we reached our time. I wonder if I can't see questions in the chat box, but if there was something from YouTube, which I can't see, but probably not. It would have been, okay, no, not at the moment. I don't know if anyone has any very, very brief and final question or a very final comment from Professor Cano and from Miss Gradualite, if you want to say something, 1 minute each.
Okay, I would say thank you very much to all of you, and to all the people. Don't forget migrants are human beings. I mean, that's the most important thing, and that must be our point of view, and we must maintain it in every circumstances. That's what I think is the most important. Don't forget they are human beings as we are human beings.
Thank you. Lina, would you like to say something?
I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and I hope we will collaborate in the future as well, like, because I think it's very valuable, like, to share experiences of different countries. And also, like, in Lithuania, our country is still not very experienced in this field, like, so we really need, I think, that solidarity and work together, like, in this field.
Thank you very much. And I have to say, I really shared this. I think I've learned a lot personally tonight, and I hope this is just the first step for a collaboration together, and yeah, keep this debate open. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, we will soon advertise our 4th seminar, which will be on freedom of religion and freedom of thought in Europe. And thank you so much to our panelists and the attendees, and have a nice evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.